Iliocostalis will originate the posterior surface of ribs 1 through 12 and the common tendon of lumborum, and will insert on the posterior surface of all of the ribs. There's quite a few muscles in the spine where people will say the cervical portion of iliocostalis, the thoracic portion of iliocostalis, and so on and so forth. Longissimus will originate the common tendon of thoracis and transverse process of the upper 5 thoracic vertebrae, and will insert at the lower 9 ribs and transverse processes of the thoracic vertebrae, the transverse processes of the cervical vertebrae, and the mastoid process. Spinalis originates at the spinous process of the upper lumbar and lower thoracic vertebrae, the ligament nuchae, and the spinous process of C7. It will insert the spinous process of the upper thoracic and cervical vertebrae, except for C1. Quadratus lumborum will originate the posterior iliac crest and insert at the last rib, the 12th rib, and the transverse process of lumbar 1 through 4. Serratus posterior inferior originates at the spinous process of T12 through L3 and will insert at the posterior surface of the 9th through 12th ribs. Serratus posterior superior will originate the spinous process of C7 through T3 and will insert at the posterior surface of the 2nd through 5th ribs. Splenius capitis will originate from the inferior half of the ligament nuchae and spinous process of C7 through T4 and will insert at the mastoid process and lateral portion of the superior nuchal line. Splenius cervicis, also called splenius coli, will originate this spinous process of T12 through T6 and will insert at the transverse process of C1 through C3. Oblique capitis inferior originates the spinous process of C2 and inserts the transverse process of C1. Oblique capitis superior originates transverse process of C1 and inserts between the nuchal lines on the occiput. Rectus capitis posterior major originates spinous process of C2 and inserts inferior nuchal line of the occiput. Rectus capitis posterior minor originates the tubercle of posterior arch of C1 and inserts the inferior nuchal line of the occiput. The audio is a little behind here. Interspinales originates spinous process of C2 through T3 and T12 through L5 and inserts the spinous process of the vertebra directly above the origin. Intertransversarii will originate the transverse process of C2 through C7 and L1 through L5 and insert at the transverse process of the vertebra directly above the origin. Multifidus will originate the sacrum and transverse process of the lumbar through cervical vertebrae and insert spinous process of L5 through C2, 2 to 4 vertebrae above the origin. The rotatories will originate the transverse process of the lumbar through cervical vertebrae and insert the spinous process of L5 through C2, 1 to 2 vertebrae above the origin. And semispinalis will originate the transverse process of C4 through T5 and insert the occiput between the superior and inferior nuchal lines and the transverse process of, or the spinous process of about 5 to 7 vertebrae above the origin. Okay, we're back on track here. Sorry about that. The diaphragm will originate the interior surface of the lower 6 ribs and the upper 2 to 3 lumbar vertebrae and the inner, or I guess you could say posterior aspect of the xiphoid process, and will insert at the central tendon. External intercostals will originate the inferior border of the rib above and insert the superior border of the rib below, and same with the internal intercostals, except the external is for inhalation and the internal is for exhalation. External oblique will originate the external surfaces of ribs 5 through 12 and will insert the anterior portion of the iliac crest and abdominal aponeurosis to the linea alba. The internal obliques will originate the lateral inguinal ligament, the iliac crest, and the thoracolumbar fascia, and will insert at the internal surfaces of the lower 3 ribs and abdominal aponeurosis to linea alba. Rectus abdominis will originate the pubic symphysis and crest and will insert the costal cartilage of ribs 5 through 7 and the xiphoid process. Transverse abdominis will originate the lateral inguinal ligament, iliac crest, thoracolumbar fascia, and the lower 6 ribs, and will insert at the abdominal aponeurosis to the linea aspera. Big shout out to KenHub, by the way. They are a great anatomy resource. Thank you for watching. I hope it was helpful and educational for you.